Tina LeAnn, founder of the Silverian Soul, NLP, master practitioner and trainer, human design and gene keys expert, transformational coach, and host of the Sorvigen Soul podcast. Tina's work sits at the intersection of deep energetics and practical structure. Her approach blends NLP and MER, emotional release techniques, with human design and gene keys to release subconscious imprints and emotional residue without asking clients to re-traumatize or rehash the past. She's known for helping women build unshakable self-trust, shift identity at the root, and translate clarity into action across relationships, money, and purpose. A Salt Lake City transplant and a lifelong seeker, Tina brings real-world grit and lived experience to every room she leads. Today, she's here to share tools you can use immediately so your next chapter isn't just imagined, it's embodied. Please welcome Tina.
I was floating in the darkness with my hand outstretched. My cousin was floating in the darkness with his hand outstretched just in front of me. And we were trying to reach each other's hands, but we just couldn't get there. And he said, "Tina, I need your help." And I said, "B, grab my hand." And he said, "Tina, I can't." And I said, "B, try harder." And he said, "I can't reach it." And I woke up and I was startled and my heart was beating so hard. And I realized, like, oh my God, that was a dream. So I grabbed my phone and I sent my cousin a text. "B, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "I'm just checking in." And I got a thumbs up. Later that day, I went to lunch with our late Aunt Phyllis. And we were just chit-chatting, normal lunch, talking about family and her grandkids and all the things. And we were just wrapping up and she said, "Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. I saw Judy last week, B's mom. I saw Judy last week and she's really worried about B. He's using again." And I said, "Oh no." I said, the dream flashed back in my head and I said, "I'll give him a call as soon as I get in my car." So I called B when I got in my car and I told him, I said, "Hey, Auntie Phyllis just told me she talked to your mom and you're using again." And I fully expected him to lie. And I fully expected him to say, "I'm just fine." And instead he said, "I need help." So for the next few months, he was back and forth, in and out of my house, detoxing from heroin. Part of the deal with him coming to my house was that he was going to get a sponsor and some therapy, but he was so determined he could do it on his own. And he would stop using, he would start to feel a little better, and then he was so determined he just wanted to go home. And I tried to talk him into staying, but it wasn't up to me, it was up to him. And so he would get clean, he would feel better, and then he would leave. And he did this 3 times, and each time he would relapse. And then some of our other family members stepped in, an aunt, an uncle, our great uncle, another cousin. They were all throwing him a lifeline. But we couldn't make the decision for him. He had to make the decision for himself. He had to do it for himself. And then a few months later, I got a call that I'll never forget. His voice was shaky, and he said, "Tina, I'm going to die." And I said, "I know, B. What do you need? How can I help you?" And he said, "I'm at Rogers Treatment Center right now, and their beds are full. My insurance isn't lining up, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "I'll be right there." So I picked him up. We went to grab a bite to eat to regroup. And we were just talking, and he kind of had his head down. And then he lifted up his head, and he said, "Let's just go to Grow Services. I talked to them a couple weeks ago. Maybe they have a bed available now." So we got in the car, and I took him as fast as I could before he changed his mind. And sure enough, they didn't have a bed, but they moved a lot. They moved some stuff around, and they made space for him. And it felt like the universe just opened up moved a couple things around to give him one last chance. So I handed him a laundry basket full of his things, and I had a book in my purse called The Untethered Soul. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's such a good book. And I threw it in the basket, and I said, hey, B, if you have time, this is a really good book. And then I looked at him, and I said, you've tried to do this on your own. You've burned so many bridges. This is it. This is your chance. Let them help you. Just surrender to the process. And we hugged. I left. He stayed for 3 months. And that was 6 years ago. And today he's here, alive, and rebuilding his life. So I'm not an addict, and I'm not in recovery, but I've lived with a lot of addiction in my life. I've lost 2 uncles and a cousin to alcohol. I've lost 2 cousins to opioid overdose. My mom was hooked on pills from a back injury when I was about 5, 6 years old for several years, and my dad coped with PTSD from the Vietnam War with alcohol. So I learned from a really young age to be invisible and to be quiet and to keep the peace at all costs. And while those strategies served me when I was young, and they kept me safe when I was young, as an adult, they no longer worked for me. And so I went on a journey to learn about all things healing, human body, spirituality, and all the things. And when I came across NLP, it connected a lot of dots. Not all the dots, but it connected a lot of dots. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about NLP today and about strategies. And so NLP is basically Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And so neuro is how we take in the world. It's through our 5 senses, through what we see, what we hear, what we taste, smell. Linguistic is what we do with all of that information, how we piece it together. We create storyline and we make meaning out of things, right? And then programming, our unconscious creates programs based on what we're taking in and what we do with that information. So NLP basically teaches us how to use the language of the mind to get the results that we want. Why this is important, so if you think about it, your language, the words that you use based on your values, beliefs, and your past experiences have gotten you where you are today. So if we shift your language just a little bit, you can get different results. Really easy. So let's talk about the neurology just a little bit, because I think there's some other speakers who are going to hit on this too. But from birth to about age 7, you're in a hypnotic state. You're in a theta brainwave state, kind of a hypnotic learning state. Everything that is happening around you, your unconscious is picking up. And your critical thinking filter isn't quite developed yet. And so everything that comes in is your system is gathering it as truth. And then what happens is you start building strategies to cope at a really young age. And these strategies are built to survive. Some of them are very helpful and some of them aren't. So, for example, if a child hears, good girls don't get angry, the code that's installed is, I'm not allowed to speak my mind, right? And then the strategy that's created is, I'm afraid to stand up for myself, or I should just keep quiet and suppress myself, right? Or for example, a child only gets attention when they achieve. The code that's installed is, when I perform, I'm loved. And then the strategy becomes overworking to receive love. Another example, a child receives more attention when they take care of others. So the code that's installed is, when my worth comes from meeting everyone else's needs. And then the strategy becomes overgiving to receive love. So let's say you were criticized as a child. All of that information, the unconscious mind groups all of that information into an emotional chain. So let's say your boss criticizes you today. You're not just responding to that one moment, to that one criticism. You're responding to the reaction from the emotional chain that was encoded and embedded from decades ago. So let's look at what strategies are. Strategies are automatic survival sequences, and some of them are good and some of them aren't. Like I said, we have strategies for everything. So a good survival strategy is we get up in the morning, we get ready, and we go to work to make money to survive, right? That's a helpful one. And then our unconscious also creates so-called self-sabotaging patterns or strategies. They're both to keep you safe, but some of them are just unhelpful at some point in your life. So you create behaviors or strategies based on what you see, hear, and what you feel. So let's say you hear someone raise their voice, you see an angry face, you feel unsafe, and then you hide, right? Or let's say you hear someone cheering for you, you see a happy face, you feel safe, and then you allow yourself to be seen and heard. So you can see how these strategies are there to protect you, but some of them are helpful and some of them aren't. So a personal example in my house is I would hear a car pull into the driveway. I would see, that's auditory, I would see my mom's face. I could gauge what kind of mood she was in, right? And then I decide whether to disappear or to engage carefully. And then based on that, do I run or do I stay there? That's where the behavior comes into play, right? And this happens in milliseconds, and it's learned at a really, really, really young age. The reason I'm sharing all this with you today is because once you understand this, you can shift your behavior. You can choose a different behavior, and you can change your own strategies anytime you want. So every behavior has a strategy, including addiction behaviors. Love has a strategy. We have a strategy for brushing our teeth. We have a strategy for everything in our life. Strategies are formed before critical thinking was developed, and research shows that 95% of our behaviors are unconscious patterns or strategies. Your unconscious is running the show. And so when we learn this stuff, we can learn to tap into our unconscious to change the behaviors and to change the thinking and the patterns to run a different show, right? So let's look at how coping becomes addiction. There's a trigger that leads to an internal representation. Let's use, for example, pain, fear, or abandonment. And then the strategy kicks in, and you seek external solution to remedy that internal feeling. So let's say you feel pain, fear, or abandonment, and you grab a beer, or you eat a candy bar. Your go-to is sugar, or your go-to is to go to Netflix and binge watch a show or something like that to numb out that way. You find temporary relief in that external behavior. You find temporary relief, and then the brain wires that as successful, and it strengthens the pattern. And then when you feel the temporary relief of peace, the brain wires it as successful, then you're more apt to repeat it, and the more you repeat it, the stronger it gets. So my mom's strategy with her back pain, right? She had back pain. She felt emotionally overwhelmed with this back pain and trying to take care of 2 young kids. So she would pop a pill, she would take a painkiller, which gave her temporary relief. Her brain wired that as success, which strengthened the pattern, and then she repeated it. My dad's strategy, he felt stress from work. He would come home to kind of a chaotic household. He would grab a beer to decompress. He would feel a sense of peace. The brain wires it as success, and the pattern strengthens. My strategy was I would sense tension in the house. I would become invisible, shrink down, or just not say anything. There was no conflict. My brain wired that as successful or safe, and so I would repeat that, which strengthened the pattern. And so the more you do that, the more the pattern is strengthened. So why this matters for you, when you understand this, you can stop. When you have that external trigger and you feel the strategy start to run, you can notice it and you can stop right then and there. You can stop before you take the next step, and you can completely change your behavior. You can go for a run instead of grabbing a beer. You can call a friend instead of turning on Netflix. You can take a different action. And when you take that different action and you start to feel that sense of peace, your brain wires that as success, and then it strengthens the patterns. And the more you do it, the stronger it gets. So it changes everything, not only for you, but for everyone around you. You are not broken. I spent years thinking I was weak for being a people pleaser, and then I realized that little girl was pretty brilliant for coming up with a strategy like that to keep herself safe, right? At a really young age. My dad wasn't weak for drinking. He was trying to cope with being a war vet, working a second shift job, and keeping a chaotic household running. And he didn't have any tools. My mom wasn't a bad person for taking painkillers. She was just doing the best with what she was doing the best she could with what she had. You can rewire strategies at any age, no matter how young or old you are. And you already have all the resources within you. That child who learned to read a room in seconds has incredible intuition. The child who learned to nurture everyone is extremely compassionate. That kid who escaped with substances has amazing imagination and creativity. So every strategy has a positive intention that can be redirected. And so if you want to, right now, just reflect for a minute. What age were you when you learned that the world wasn't safe? What did you do to protect yourself? And how are those same patterns showing up in your life today? You can design your recovery. You can create your new future. You can go from invisible to being consciously present. You can go from people-pleasing to creating authentic boundaries. You can go from overgiving to balanced reciprocity. You can go from numbing to allowing yourself to feel and heal. And you can go from escaping to being fully present in life. And the most beautiful part is when you master this, not only does it change your life, but it changes the lives of everybody around you. Studies show you have a 73% reduction in cravings when you are aware of your strategies and when you stop your strategies and do something else in repetition every single day. And while this is I'm simplifying this, it's a very simple concept. We're human, and sometimes it isn't always easy. And so give yourself some grace if you screw up one day. Give yourself some grace and just start where you left off the next day. You have improved emotional regulation, deeper connections in relationships. Your creativity and joy returns, right? You break generational patterns. Go ahead. You learn to feel safe without substances or external remedies. You become someone's reason to believe. You can repair relationships with compassion, and your protective strategies become your superpowers. So you were coded young. It wasn't your fault. Your brain can rewire at any age. You have everything you need already inside of you. Recovery is an update. It's not a complete rebuild. So you are not your addiction. You are not your family's patterns. You are a magnificent human being ready to rewrite your story. So thank you for your courage. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for saying yes to your healing journey.